Well, our contribution to the Biennale is a piece called the Museum of Copying, which really explores the idea of copying in architecture, both as something which is really fundamental to how architecture becomes common, let's say, how architectural language is created. But of course, something weird happens when things are copied. They might look exactly the same as the original, but they perform in an entirely different way. And in some senses, our intention here was, as you walk through the Biennale, you're often confronted by architects being incredibly original. So you see something that you've never seen before, but at the same time you have a funny feeling that, hold on a minute, you have seen it before. Ours is the other opposite. We want people to say, oh, I know what that is, but also to recognise that it's also something that they've never seen before. So it kind of flips the usual kind of relationship between originality and product in architecture. What we're interested here is not so much the kind of the shock value of the copy, or let's say it's kind of kitsch quality, but it's much more to do with the strange stories as to how these copies came into the world. Why are they there? Who made them? And for what purpose? So another project that we've commissioned is by Ines Weisman. It's called Repeat Yourself, and it really follows the ownership of the Adolf Loos archive, in particular the project for the house for Josephine Baker. And she's explored through a very detailed piece of research, very detailed timeline that's displayed here, issues really of ownership of archive, so the way in which intellectual property plays out over architectural information, let's say architectural culture. And the last project is by a group called San Rocco, who have made what's called the Book of Copies. The Book of Copies, of course, isn't a book. It'll never be a singular book. One hopes it will never be a singular book. But what it is a process. They've invited 60 architects and designers and so on to make so-called books by photocopying magazines, books, old calendars, whatever they might find. And here at the Biennale, visitors can assemble their own book by choosing the sheets and taking it to the photocopier that we've kindly provided for them, so that every book of copies that is created, of course, is an original. We think is really anachronistic. We think of other forms of media, other forms of kind of creative practice, from music to art, to literature. The idea of appropriation, the idea of using found materials is incredibly commonplace, and yet within architecture we still cling on to this very old-fashioned kind of early 20th century notion, which is of course against the entire nature of contemporary information culture. It's against the way in which we actually make architecture, which is full of copy, paste, it's full of duplicate array, it's full of the technologies of copying, and so the more and more digital architecture becomes, the more and more it relies upon the actual act of copying. I think it's an expression for facts of a kind of interest that we've had for a long time in the process of copying within architecture, the idea of copying in architecture. It's not so much a call for arms for other architects to start to copy, but it is a provocation to ask architects to think about what originality might be.